Okay, so modular routing in Express apps. Now, the high level here is not to worry so much about how Express does it, but the high level goal here is thinking about how can we apply some of the same principles we've been doing so far about modularizing our code. How do we keep things in small bits? And if we need to change something, we go to one place to change it. So at the moment in probably all of your sort of applications so far using Express, you probably have this one main app.js file that has a bunch of route handlers. Yep, so you define your get and post routes and then functions to execute when those URLs get matched with the right verb. So you send a post request to /game, then this function will execute. And so you can imagine the more routes that you have, the longer this file becomes. And we want to get away from the fact, we want to move away from this idea of always like adding more lines to one file. We want us to figure out what are the responsibilities and how can we modularize it? How can we split this up? So one of the ways that we do this is by looking at the URLs and say, okay, what are some common things that are happening? And can we identify a group? So think back to when we're doing cohesion. How can we make how can we extract more cohesive sets of routes? So the easy one here is to notice that we have two game routes, different verbs, a post and a get, but two routes that are dealing with updating the game or fetching the current state of the game. So this feels like it should be pulled out into its own controller. And so in order to do this, we need to do two things. One is set up a way to modularize this using Express Router. And then secondly, think about how do we store the state of the game. At the moment, we're storing it outside of the app on line 10. You might have found a different way to do this. But we store the state outside of it, and then we can refer back to it. So this is essentially a global variable. It's available to our whole application. And we need it because we will be able to interact with it in different routes. It holds the state of our application. So we've got to figure out a way through that, and we need to be able to extract these routes. So let's have a look together on how to do this. I'm going to demonstrate it, and then you're going to sort of repeat it yourselves. I'll demonstrate it for probably just this small one, and I'll let you do the other ones yourselves. So at the end of this workshop, you'll have extracted 3 controllers. Something that controls the index page or the index, any interactions with the game, and then a turn controller. And this is simply just because of the way that it's already been designed. You might have different route names in your own applications, so you might want to call these different things in your own back applications. But given this is the work that we're workshopping today, we're going to use these 3 names. Cool. Okay, so does that make sense at a high level what we're going to do? Does everyone understand the problem? Cool. Any questions before we begin? Cool. Okay. Okay, so this is the project. Let's get rid of all of this. This is our app file, and we need to be able to extract first this route handler. So if you look at the resource at the bottom here, there are some useful sources of documentation for how to do this. So let's have a look at them together. I'm going to take this out and work on this one. Okay. So this is documentation to help. What this is saying is we can use the express router class to create modular mountable route handlers, which is what I want. In order to do this, we create a separate file and export it. And then in order to use it in our app, our main app.js file will just load our controller or our router and then use it at specific routes. So what we're trying to do here is export a file, and we're exporting specifically this router. We've set it up to handle different routes. And so when we use it in our application, anything at /birds gets redirected or gets used with our router. So it's a mini router. And so we'll have access to a /birds get request and /birds /about request. They build on each other. You can see it down here. The app will now be able to handle requests at /birds about. So the first step is to extract and put into its own file the controller. So let's do that. So I'm going to create a folder and keep all my and I'm going to call them controllers because that's a convention to store these kinds of files or these kinds of responsibilities. And here I'm going to call this, I guess, the index. This is the index controller. I'm just going to handle anything at the index. So I'm just going to move this whole thing. Let's move that and put this here. But if I look back at the documentation, it says I need to require a few things, and I'm going to always use const rather than via. And I'm going to use router like this. I also need to export it, so that's module.exports. So all I need to do is define whatever routes I want at that sort of route and then export it. Now, in order to use it in app.js, I need to require it. So let's call it index controller. You can call it index router if you wanted to. I'm going to call it controller. And I'm going to require controllers index. And I therefore, rather than define the route here, I've already defined it. So I'm just say app use, and then at that URL, which is the index, that's fine. What is the controller that I want? I just want index controller. So I can now move all of these route handlers into their own respective files according to the URL that they are matching. So here I can move both of these into one controller and define more routes here. So I would add another file called game.js, for example, and do the same thing. Just export the same router, add different route handlers, and then load it in my app. And so I'd have something at the end of it that looks like game, and then I'd have to require it and have game controller. So this is a short demonstration of the process of moving logic from your app.js into a specific file, exporting it, and then loading it into your app, making use of the router class, and then using the router for any matching URLs at /index. And the other part I wanted to demonstrate was getting access to we'll be able to store application data. So I don't want to store this outside here anymore. on line 10. If I need to store data, rather than store it here outside of the app, I want to store it inside the app. And so you have access to the app by using the request.app. You have a property called locals that you can use. And you can add data here. So for example, I would add a property to that locals called battle, and I would store it like this. And this persists in between requests. So this stores at the application level. And so if I needed to use it at a different route, for example, here, I could then fetch it out of like this. So I can store it, set the property, and then read the property back at a different route by storing it on request app locals. So this allows you to store data at the application level. So you don't need to store it outside of your app. And it's available to you in between requests. And you'll need this because when you import it from a different file, you won't have access to any local variables from app.js. So when you import your game controller from a different file, you'll need to make sure that you store data on the request app locals. Cool. Okay, look. If I go back to our set of instructions for this morning, what I want you to do is be able to, by the end of the session, understand the benefits of modularizing our route handlers. Go ahead and modularize a few and use app.locals to store application level data. So this is our set of objectives for this morning. I want you to run your tests. So everything should be passing before you begin work after you've set up the project. So install any dependencies, run your app, and then run Cypress. There should be a bunch of feature tests. They should pass, and even after you've extracted all the controllers, you haven't changed any functionality, your test should still pass. This is just a refactoring exercise. Resources at the bottom here to have a look at, and we'll talk about this one at the end of the session. Any questions in order for you to begin work when I pair you up? Cool. Okie doke. I will go ahead and there you are. Breakout rooms. 7. Assign automatically. And give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go. Hopefully that's everyone. Boom, 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 boom. Look at that. I'll just assume you're mentally projecting a thumbs up if you haven't yet. Okay, opening rooms, away we go. You're in by yourself, by the way.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I was a bit confused. What's going on there?
Yeah, feel free just to hang out by yourself, or I can put you into a 3. What would you prefer?
I don't mind. You can go into a 3. It's probably nicer, more social.
I will do that.
Cool.
Yesterday. Oh.
Hey, folks.
Oh. Hi.
I'm gonna throw Anthony into this group. He's in room 7 all by himself, so he's gonna move up a room to room 6.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. All right, bye.